Good afternoon, and thank you for coming to our workshop series. I am Paul Byrne. I am the Research Data Services Librarian here at Syracuse University. As you may have guessed, I support Qualtrics for the campus. I also support SAS, Stata, SPSS, finding data, collecting data, analyzing data, cleaning data, anything having to do with data. I can help you with. Our series, there's 7 of these classes that will go every Monday from 3 to 4 p.m. thereabouts. Some might be shorter, some might be a little bit longer. All of them are being recorded. You're being recorded as we speak. And I usually try to get those recordings posted on my website where you registered for this within a day or two. It has to render, and then I have to fix all the captions because we can't post anything without captions. And so that usually takes a day, and depending on how busy I am. But as I say, it's usually a day or two before I get them posted. If at any time you can't hear me, please say so. You can either just unmute yourself and say so, or you can type it into the chat. Any questions that you might have as we go along, again, you can just unmute yourself and ask, or type it into the chat. I'll do my best to keep an eye on that. I have a tendency sometimes to go a little fast, so if I'm going too fast, please say so. And today will be one of those days, because this introductory one is where I show you all the bells and whistles, and Qualtrics keeps adding more bells and whistles, so I have to get more and more into the hour that we're here. So it's going to be a whirlwind tour of Qualtrics, and then we'll get into the more nitty-gritty as we go along in the following weeks. As I say, if you have questions now, if you have any questions about Qualtrics or anything else having to do with data, you are welcome to email me or call me, and we will see what we can do about getting your questions answered. So before we really get into anything today, are there any questions? Okay, great. Let's see, let's go back to the home screen. When you first log into Qualtrics, and some of you may have already done this numerous times, some of you may not have done it at all, but this is basically where you come in and what you can see. You can customize this home page. Personally, I don't find this page all that useful. If you have a lot of ongoing surveys and you want to see where they are, you can certainly, this might be more useful to you. Of course, your recent surveys are over here on the left, and that can be kind of useful since you can get right to what you were working on. I usually just go straight to see all projects. And this is where you can see every project you have. You can create folders, and if you have a lot of projects like I do, putting them in folders makes your life a lot easier. You just come up here and click, and you can create a subfolder, and you can create subfolders of subfolders if you like. You can filter projects, what status they are. I have this little toolbar settings, and that's just what columns are being displayed at any particular time. You also have these little project options, and you can do all kinds of stuff. A lot of this is already, excuse me, you can get to all of these things from within the project itself as well. And to open a project, you just click on it. For right now, though, we're going to go to create project. Well, I'm just going to show you have the home, projects. Catalog is where you can keep copies of questions and blocks and full surveys. Workflows are very useful if you want to add people to a contact list or send them email. You can create a contact list. Qualtrics has named this different things. I believe, I'm sorry to say, Alonzo, can you please mute yourself? Sometimes you'll see this called contacts. Yeah. Sometimes it's a panel. It's like when you. Sometimes it's a directory. And library is also where you can keep various thank you messages that you want to use over and over again. We'll look at this in a bit. You can get help by clicking over here, and you can search for help. This is where various notifications, if you are going to collaborate with somebody, this will pop up with a notification for the person to says that they've accepted the collaboration or they've invited you to collaborate. Then we're going to come over here to my account and click on that. And for right now, I want to go to account settings. And there's a few things in here that you definitely want to make sure. And the first one of that is the time zone. Make sure if you are indeed working in the Eastern time, set it to Eastern time zone. If you're in California, set it to wherever you are working. This is important because if you set up a time for a survey to be available, say between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. on a particular day, it's going to go by whatever this is. So if this is set to California time and you're in New York, it's going to mess up your data collection. User email defaults, you can change this, and whenever you have email sent automatically from Qualtrics, this is what it will use. You can change it on a case-by-case basis, but this is the default, and so that makes your life a lot easier. If you ever need to contact Qualtrics and get support from them, this is where you'll need to go to let them get into your account and see what you're doing. Linking accounts is if you have another account here, you can link the two and work back and forth in them. I really don't know anybody who has used that. And then there's, just a few things if you want to upgrade your account, which you really can't do because you need permission from the university to do that. It's not upgrading you personally, it's upgrading everybody. Account usage really is just, how much you've been using it. And Qualtrics IDs, these can be sometimes useful. You'll see some places when you need to log in, they'll say, what's your organization ID? And this is it right here. Most of these other things you probably won't use, but this one can be useful. We'll come back up here to my account. The other thing I want to show you is this refresh account. If you're making changes and things don't seem to quite, I guess, take or save or really work, sometimes you need to come over here to refresh account. And that really does what it says. It clears everything out. It gets rid of some of the stuff in the memory and the cache so that you're kind of working from a clean slate. And sometimes you also need to do this if you are collaborating with somebody. If you accept a collaboration or send one out, you might need to refresh the account to get everything synced up. And of course, log out. So we'll go back to projects. Now we'll go to create project. And as you can see, they've got all kinds of templates, things that you can start out with. They already have a lot of questions made up and any kind of skip or display patterns, etc. And you can go through these and look at them and see if things, it's just a good way of starting if you're doing something along these lines. I think most of the time people just start from scratch. And it tells you and learn how to create a survey, and we'll click on get started. And of course you name it, and I'm going to call this intro. You can put it in whatever folder you like if you have folders, and how you want to start the survey. You can import a previously created survey that somebody has sent to you, copy from an existing project, or use one from your library. I'll show you the library in a little later. But right now, we're just going to start from complete blank scratch. And here's where you start creating your survey. And there are, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, there are about a zillion bells and whistles that you can use here. You have survey, which you're in what they call the survey builder. Workflows are great if you want to send automatic emails to people, or if you want to add them to a contact list, as well as a couple other things. We'll look at that. Distributions is exactly that, distributing your survey. There's several ways of doing that. Data and analysis, this is where you'll go in and you'll see the data as people are responding to your survey. And you can do a few things, including exporting and whatnot. Results is where you can do some basic visualization and create, they also say reports. There's not a whole lot of difference here. Reports is more if you want to create a printable report, whereas the results is more of dashboard type of stuff, if that makes any kind of sense. So let's take a quick look at tools here. As you create your survey and you create new questions, Qualtrics automatically numbers them Q1, Q2, Q3 in the order that you create them. So if you create 10 questions and then you say, oh, I want to rearrange them, you can do that very easily, but Qualtrics will not automatically renumber everything. If you want to have them in actual numerical order, you just need to go in and click auto number questions. And there's different ways of numbering it. The internal ID numbering, don't use. That's the Qualtrics internal ID for a particular question, and it doesn't make any sense to human beings. Block numbering is, we'll talk about blocks, but you can have things numbered within blocks. Most people just use the sequential numbering. You could have whatever prefix you want. You can call it Q or Q question, assuming you spell it correctly. Skip export tags that I have defined. I'm going to show you in a minute. You don't have to call everything Q1, Q2, Q3. You can put in your own names for that, and that will end up being your variable names once you download the data, say to SPSS. And that's another thing with Qualtrics is in some places they call it export tags. Some places they call it question numbers. It's the same thing. It's just that some things are holdovers from 10 years ago when they first started. Reset recode values. We'll be talking about recode values next week. It's a way of when you make these choices, Qualtrics numbers them 1, 2, 3 right through. And so you might want to redo that. Reusable choices is you can make your own set of choices and reuse them. Generate test response. This is very useful. And this is a way of generating dummy data. I'm going to say 50 because 5 really isn't very much. We'll say start test. And it gives you this information, which isn't necessarily all that useful. And close that up. And we'll see in a minute, it created 50 dummy responses. And that's good for just being able to look at your data and seeing that it's actually working and doing kind of what you expect it to. Review is, search and replace. Strip formatting is if you copy and paste, say from a web page or a Word document, there's all this code behind the scenes. And when you copy and paste into Qualtrics, some of that code gets pulled over and it makes things look weird. So strip formatting will take all of that stuff out and leave you with just plain text, which you can then go in and format as you see fit. Spell check, you know what that is. Check survey accessibility. This is something that you really need to do on a consistent basis. And it will tell you, what's good about this is it will show you what's good, what needs work, and what questions might need to be changed or improved in some way. We'll see more about this as we go through in the coming weeks. Collaborate is if you want to give other people access to your survey. You can let them edit, just view reports, activate, deactivate, copy, distribute it. Now, what's interesting about this is that whoever you give collaboration to, access to, they have to have already logged into Qualtrics at least once. If they've never logged into it, they won't show up in this list. Like I can use John Olson is one of our other librarians here, and he's never had occasion to use Qualtrics, but he's never shown up here. So, you know, his Qualtrics ID doesn't show up. Versions can be useful. You can go back and look at the version history, and you can go back. So if you're getting into some kind of complicated things and it's not, you make a change and it kind of blows up on you, you can always go back to the last version that worked the way you wanted it to and start over again. And you can actually tell Qualtrics, I want to create this version. This looks good. This is, you know, where I want to be able to go back to. Import and export, as it says, you can print the survey. You can import a survey. It needs to be a Qualtrics survey. You can't import a, you know, Survey Monkey survey or import a Word document as a survey. And export survey, that's you know, does the opposite, is it creates a .qsf file that you can then either just save or email to somebody. This might be useful if you're going to another institution, because sometimes transferring, you know, doing a direct transfer within Qualtrics from one institution to another can be a little dicey. It can be done if you have a lot of surveys and you want to keep all the data. As soon as you know you're going to another institution, contact Qualtrics and tell them. Don't wait around until the day before you're moving. And then export survey to Word. This can be very useful just as documentation. If eventually, as you will, if you're working on a thesis or dissertation or any other research where you have to go through IRB, you can click all of these and export it to Word and turn that in. It's also good for just documenting your survey. If later on you are required to share your data with the public, you're also going to have to share the survey itself and any other documentation. And this makes doing that very easy. And then keyboard shortcuts, it just shows the keyboard shortcuts that are available. You can't change any of them. If you like keyboard shortcuts, go ahead and look at these. I usually don't. I kind of like using the mouse. Are there any questions so far? Okay. This is the name of the survey. You can change it right in here if you want. Qualtrics works with question blocks. And the blocks become very useful later on when we start doing survey flow. Now, you can have all of your questions in one block. If you only have 10 questions, that's probably what you'll do. If you have 100, then you're going to want different blocks because they're probably asking different types of questions about different items. You can change the name of the block. So maybe this is your demographics. And if you come over here, you can add a block below, move it, copy it, lock it so that it can't be changed, delete it if you need to. Collapse questions just collapses the whole thing. So if you have a big long survey, it just makes scrolling back and forth through this a little bit easier. Preview block is just to preview that block as a survey. It goes along with preview up here, does the entire survey. Preview block just does that one block. You can view it in the survey flow, which we'll look at the survey flow in a couple of minutes. You can copy the block to a library. So if you have these, say, the demographic questions, and you always like using the same questions with the same possible answers, you can copy this to a library. And then that way, when you make your next survey, you can just copy this block from that library and you're done. You don't have to recreate it every time. You can also copy individual questions to the library. Now, and you can see when you click in the whole block, you can see how it's kind of outlined here. You get question randomization. You can randomize all the questions. Loop and merge is useful. If you're doing, say, a survey on families, you can ask, how many children do you have? And we'll say 3. And then you can cycle through each child and ask the same questions. What is your child's name? How old is your child? What's your child's favorite ice cream? And you can have it do that automatically 3 times without having to write out all those questions 3 times. We'll be doing this in maybe 3 or 4 weeks. And you can also format the previous and next button with each block. Each block will display on a page. And so you can change the text, and to be make sure that it's accessible, you really should use words previous and next. And what a lot of people will do is they'll do previous and next for all of the blocks, except for the very last one, where the next button will be submit. Questions? Okay. Moving on to questions, individual questions. If you click in there, you see how it highlights differently. And you get all your options for whatever type of question you have here. Your options on the left will change. So allow one answer, allow multiple answers, and you can see it automatically changes into a checkbox. You can change the number of choices very easily. This edit multiple can be useful if you have a question where you're giving them many choices, like different kinds of occupations, or say, all 50 states. You can either copy and paste from something else and copy and paste it in here, or just type it. It's a lot easier sometimes to just type it in here than it is to come over here and then change each individual one. We'll look at that again in a second. And It even gives you suggested choices. You can come through, and that can make your life a lot easier. And you can reverse the order, all kinds of neat stuff. The display, list format, or drop down. You want to avoid drop downs and select boxes because they're not always accessible. Add choice group. This is good if you have a lot, say like occupations, and you want to group them as to type, say, service, professional, etc. And it doesn't do anything with the analysis. It just makes the display easier to look at. That's all it does. There's requirements, force a response, which means they have to answer it, or request a response where if they don't answer it, it comes back and says, oh, pretty please. Validation. We'll be looking at this more in the next week or two, but you can make sure that, if somebody says they are male, that they don't also say that they're 6 months pregnant. And there's display logic as to whether or not a question gets displayed. Skip logic is one of those things. If yes, please go to question 10. Carry forward is good. If you give people, say, a list of ice cream flavors and say, please check your 3 favorite, in the next question, you can take those 3 favorites and make those answers. Not only can you randomize the questions within a block, you can randomize the choices within a question. Recode values, as I mentioned before, I'll just click on that. Qualtrics will automatically number these 1 through however many you have. That may not be really what you want. So you can click here and maybe you want always to be 10, 20, 30. And so when you download your data, it will come down as 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever else you might want in here. Variable naming is a little bit of a misnomer. If you're familiar with SPSS or Stata, it's really value labeling. And again, this is nothing more than for display purposes. And so you can change it to never ever. And so when you do any kind of charts in Qualtrics, or if you download it to SPSS, this is what it will display instead of the default over here. We'll see more of that in the next couple of weeks. You can decide on default choices, make something the default.
Yeah.
You can put in JavaScript. That's really kind of rare for anybody to do. And if you don't know JavaScript, it's not going to be of much use to you. And you can see over here, as we put in different options, different things will show up. Default choices, recoded values, as variable naming, etc. You can also change here. And then This will end up being the variable name in SPSS, or the column label at the in the first row of an Excel spreadsheet, instead of Q1, Q2, whatever it is. This can be very useful if you are using a published survey, and it comes with, hopefully it comes with, say, SPSS code to analyze the data. If you change here to match the variable names that they're using in those programs, it will make your life infinitely easier, because then you can just rerun those SPSS programs and you're done. Whereas if this is still Q1, Q2, you're either going to have to go into SPSS and change all the variable names in there, or change all the code, all the programs that they give you. And I seriously recommend you do not change the code that you're given. It's a lot easier to just do it in this instance, and then it's all set and ready to go. And more of these, you can move the question, copy it, replace it from the library, as we said, add a page break, preview the question, add a note. This is the note. Your respondents will not see the notes. The notes are for you and anybody you might be collaborating with, just to give yourself a reminder, or to discuss things back and forth. And of course, you can delete the question. And they have tons of different types of questions. Not all of these are accessible, like a slider is not accessible. So there's nothing saying you can't use it, but you do want to be cognizant and sensitive to the various types that are accessible or not. We'll talk more about the different types of questions and whatnot next week. Any questions? Let's see, we'll go here. Survey flow, we're going to have an entire class on just survey flow. This can be really useful. You can do branching so that some people get a whole set of questions and other people get a different set. This can also be useful with if then, or how people answer a particular question. Embedded data is a way of adding information data to your survey without the respondents actually seeing it. This is one way that you could calculate, say, BMI. You can ask their height and their weight, and then do the calculations behind the scenes, and then display the answer to them. And we'll show that once we get to survey flow. Randomizer this is really good if you're doing some kind of experimental design. You can randomize who sees what blocks or what questions. Web service is, you might want to pull in information from another website, say stock quotes or the weather, for any number of applications. And so you can pull that information in as long as, of course, the other website allows you to do that. And you can bring that in and show it to your respondents and use it. That. Text sentiment, this is like brand new, and I will confess I haven't had much of a chance to play around with it, but Qualtrics can do some fairly rudimentary text analysis. Group is a way of grouping blocks and branches and things. Again, this can be useful if you're doing experimental type of survey. The authenticator. This will make sure this is a way of authenticating your respondents, and can either do it by a contact list or by single sign-on, which is what you usually need to, well, yeah, I'm sure you know what the single sign-on is. And of course, it's only going to work with Syracuse University single sign-on. But if you really need to make sure that it's only SU people answering, you can do this. End of survey, there's a whole bunch of different options you can do. A different end of survey message. You can redirect to a URL, and that's what I used in that sign-on survey that you used to get here. Is at the end, I redirected you to the Zoom link. And you can also do this, say, if you have an anonymous survey, but you want to know if people are willing to be contacted later on. You can have your anonymous survey, and at the end, ask them, are you willing to be contacted? If they say yes, then you can redirect them to another survey, a completely separate survey where you ask for their information. And then there's a whole bunch of other things that you can depend on or use. Most of these you probably wouldn't use very much. Yep. Reference survey. If you're doing a lot of concurrent surveys, and let's say you want your demographic block to be the same for all of them, you can certainly, as I showed you before, pull something in from your library and drop it in. If you need or want to make a change to one or more of those questions in your demographic block, you would need to go into each separate survey and make that change. Whereas if you use a reference survey, you only need to change it in the reference survey, and those changes get propagated out to all the other surveys. So as I say, it's good if you're doing a lot of concurrent stuff and want it standardized. If you're doing one survey at a time, it's not necessarily all that useful. Questions? Okay, we're going to be doing an entire class just on survey flow in a few weeks. We'll go to look and feel. Don't save changes. That's one nice thing about Qualtrics, is it really, you really have to want to shoot yourself in the foot. I'm sorry, there's a question?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
So supposing I have like several survey questions, but they relate to the same variable or same scale measure. So is there any way that I can simplify the process in that those questions get batched up together under a, I don't know, common category or tag or something?
if they're in separate surveys, then there's no easy way of doing what I think you might want to do.
No, in one survey.
In one survey, sure, you can either put them all in a block, or if you do the question naming, as I showed you, so you can have, say demo 1, demo 2, demo 3, and those are your, part of your demographic block.
Right. Can you hide the question names from your participants?
Yes, and I'm going to show you that in just a minute.
Perfect.
That's like
Thanks.
in the next set of things I'm going to show you. But yes, you can
Perfect.
do
Thank
that.
you.
You can have different themes. As of right now, Syracuse University really wants you to use Syracuse Simple because it is at this point the most accessible and will produce the fewest problems. There's a couple in here that are perfectly accessible, but once you do that, it doesn't let you do a whole bunch of other things. That might be perfectly okay, but for your particular purposes. So stick with the Syracuse Simple. It's a nice layout and it looks nice. So, that's okay. So there's layouts, general, this will do the next button and the previous button for the entire survey by default. But as I showed you, you can go in and change it for individual blocks. You can have a progress bar. Technically, a progress bar is not accessible. But if you're not going to show question numbers, then you really want to show something to the respondent about how far along they are. Number of questions per page, headers and footers as you might want. Style, pretty much you want to leave all of this. Motion, this is for doing fancy page transitions. Don't do that. Just a standard one page to the next. You can put in a logo and backgrounds. Again, don't go crazy with this stuff because it might make your survey entirely inaccessible or not accessible. Now we'll go to survey options because there's a lot of stuff in here too. No, we're not going to save any of the changes. The display name is what comes up in the tab here for your respondents. So you want to put your survey name in there. Survey description, the base language, and here's the question numbers. You can turn them on or off. By default, they are off, so your respondents will not see Q1, Q2, or however you might have changed those question numbers. Now, technically, to make your survey accessible, you're supposed to have the question numbers on, and they're supposed to be numbered Q1, Q2, Q3. The thing is, especially if you have any kind of question randomization, display or skip logic, Qualtrics will not renumber things to make them, in sequential order as you're going through. So if you have skip from question 3 to question 10, that's what's going to happen. They'll be going through, it'll be Q1, Q3, Q10. And so that in itself can be confusing and gets even worse if you're randomizing the order of questions. Expert review, we'll see that in a second, it comes up and it kind of gives you some suggestions. for making your survey a little bit more accessible and a little bit more user friendly. Um, we'll see that as we go along, and you have to take it with a grain of salt. Responses. If you want to give people a back button, let people respondents finish later. If you're using an anonymous link and you want people to be able to come back, you need to turn this on. If they're coming from if you're using a contact list, you don't have to worry about it because they have their very own personal link. And as long as they have that link, they'll be able to get back into it. The thing about the anonymous link, though, is that it works by IP address and cookies. And so if the person is answering from a public workstation and they want to finish it tomorrow, they're going to have to come back to the same workstation, which may or may not be possible. You can have custom error messages, and you can do that within each of the specific questions as well. What to do with people who don't actually finish the survey within a certain amount of time, however much time you want to give them. You can either record the response, the incomplete response, or delete it. I highly recommend recording it because even if somebody doesn't answer one question, say out of 100, if you say delete, Qualtrics will delete it. Whereas, you might actually want to keep it. The one question they don't answer might not be all that important. In which case, if you delete it, then you're losing a respondent. And, when to start that ticker, when they start the survey or their last time they edited a response. Survey availability. You can say when your survey is going to be available by time and date. And so, people won't be able to start it before you say that they can, and they won't be able to finish it either by whatever the expiration time is. And you can either have the default, which would say, sorry, you can't get into it yet. Sorry, it's over with. Or you can have a custom message. And same with an inactive survey. Sometimes people come back after a long time and they say, oh, I remember this. And they want to come back and redo it. You can show that it's not active anymore. Survey access, password protection. It's a survey password, but it's the same password for everybody. So it's not much of a password. But it might make your life easier at some points. If you only want people to come from a certain URL, that's another way of making sure that somebody just doesn't stumble upon it. Prevent people from taking it multiple times. You might want that, you might not want that. Bot detection, security scan, relevant IDs. You can look into all of these. Prevent indexing, and that means people won't be able to find your survey by Googling it. And that just prevents, again, random people from stumbling upon it and answering it. You can upload files and determine who has access to those files. Anonymized responses. If you really need your even if you're using an anonymous link, it will still record some of this information. IP address is not considered anonymous. So if it's really important that things are anonymized, and you might, if you're using a contact list, you will have to do this if it's supposed to be, if the responses are anonymous. Turn this on and it won't record their IP address, their location, and any contact info, any other information that you have in the contact list. A word about location data and in some of the other things is Qualtrics uses their IP address to determine location. So it's wherever the person happens to be sitting. So right now I'm sitting in the city of Syracuse, and it'll come up with Syracuse. That might be okay for you. Most of the time, if you want to know where somebody lives, where they were born, you need to specifically ask that, because they might be visiting somebody when they're answering it, and so they're not in Syracuse. And if they're using a VPN, who knows what this is going to come up as. It might be someplace in Borneo. It might be a dummy IP address. You never know. So if you really need to know for a specific reason where somebody is, you need to specifically ask them. And stuff to do at the end of the survey. Send a message to them, revisiting a completed survey, manage email triggers and contact list triggers. These are legacy kinds of things. They want you now to actually use workflows instead of the triggers, but the triggers are here because a lot of people have been using them for years. And the same with the Salesforce triggers. All of these triggers are now available through workflows, and that's the way you'll want to do those. Scoring is like if you want to score a test, you can change these. I don't know if we go through this. I have a whole video on doing these. Yeah. Quotas are good. If you want to say only have 100 people answer your survey, you can set it so that once 100 people have answered it, it won't let anybody else in. You can also get a little fancier and say, well, out of those 100 people, I want 50 of them to be 18 to 25 years old, and the rest 26 years old and older. And you can do that. Translations, this is translating it into other languages, and there's a whole bunch that you can do. You have the base language, and all of these, it can be translated back and forth. If you do this for whatever reason, and you are not a native speaker of the language to which you are translating it, you need to find a native speaker and get them to make sure that everything makes sense and you're not, insulting their grandmother. We've all heard the funny and tragic stories of bad translations. I'm going to get through this quickly. We're going to be doing more in workflows. As I mentioned, this is a good way of automatically sending emails to people or automatically adding them to a contact list. There's a few other things you can do. I mean, there's actually a whole bunch of things you can do. Most of them you probably won't ever need to. distributions. There's different ways of distributing, and we're doing an entire class on this in a couple of weeks. And data and analysis. This is where your data will come in, and says here recorded responses. It says for some reason it can take a minute or two or more for your data to actually show up in here. And sometimes you gotta reload. Really? Well, we'll keep going here. Well, we can't, since it's not showing data, we can't do the export, which is what you'll be doing most of. And no tools. Come on, please. Seriously? There should be 50 responses. If you remember when we first started, I did that generate test responses. And you see that it says recorded responses 50, but it's taking forever. All right, I'm going to try this once more. There we go. Yay. All right, get back here. Okay, now we see all the test data that we generated. Export and import. You can export your data to a CSV. TSV is tab separated. Not many people use that anymore. Excel, of course, is very common. Depending, some might use XML. SPSS is probably the most common. You can have it sent out to a Google Drive. User submitted files are files that people might have uploaded. And always look at the more options. I don't know why sometimes by default, this will be compressed and you don't need that. Your file isn't going to be so big that you need to zip it before you download it. And then there's a bunch of other options, and we'll be doing a whole class on downloading your data, all on the data analysis, the results, and the reports. You can also import data, a bunch of other things. Tools is just saving the layout, so you can decide what questions you want displayed here. Same with the column chooser. If you want to see more of an individual response, you just click on view response, and you can see all the questions. And as you can see, the location data, and it says GeoIP estimation. So they're saying, yeah, he's somewhere in Syracuse. You can create your own fields. I don't always recommend using this, but if you're going to do dashboards, then you might need to. Results and reports, as I mentioned before, it's really the difference between dashboards and printed reports. And there's all kinds of stuff, and we're doing a whole class on these as well. So, are there any questions? Did I go too fast?
No, you were fine.
Okay, thank you. Um, okay, then, if there are no questions, then thank you all for uh, muddling through this with me, and I will see you all here next week, next Monday at 3 o'clock, where we will be doing basic question design.